F.E.A.R Extraction Point was released in 2006 as the first of 2 expansion packs for F.E.A.R released the previous year. F.E.A.R was developed by Monolith, now more known for the Middle-earth games, but its publisher, Vivendi, outsourced the development of both expansions to Timegate Studios. They had only previously worked on 3 Kohan games and a video game rendition of Axis and Allies, yet F.E.A.R Extraction Point won Best Expansion Pack of 2006. Time to find out how. Back in 2006, expansion didn't mean an hour of rushed missions and a few reskinned guns. It meant an actual significant expansion. To the game's mechanics, to the story, whatever. The line between expansion pack and DLC is blurrier than ever, but I don't think it has to be complex. By now, I don't even think it can be. It's a matter of size. Even for content significant enough to be labeled expansion, Extraction Point was brimming with changes, tweaks, and improvements. Let's start with what meets the eye. Extraction Point runs on the exact same engine as the base game, so there's no major alterations, and considering how good the first game looked, I'm very glad. Once again, pumping enemies full of submachine gun bullets in slow-mo is one of the most impressive scenes you can get from gaming. The dynamic blood splatter, bump map bullet holes, sparks, dust, and debris create a chaos on screen that is utterly entrancing. The lighting remains second to none with all of its fancy tech and dynamic damage. Shoot a light, it'll blink and swing, which adds yet another element to the aftermath of fights. And you can still use shadows in combat to predict where enemies will appear from, though in practice this doesn't happen particularly often. Really, it's the horror that benefits from the lighting most. Deeply dark corridors and rooms can be lit with your flashlight, and horrific demons can blink in and out of reality with the lights. It's gripping stuff. So, the graphics that there are remain incredible, but supposedly Extraction Point's graphics were significantly improved over the base game. I couldn't tell, and you won't be able to either, because the majority of footage in this video was recorded at medium settings rather than the usual mix of high and ultra. With better graphics comes worse performance, right? That's to be expected. Well, usually you wouldn't expect graphical improvements that are hard to even notice to cut performance in half, but that wasn't the reason I had to turn down the settings. It was actually because Extraction Point is crawling with bugs, and the most practical way to lessen the effects was to bring the settings down. In my 10 hours, I've experienced graphical glitches, freezes, 2 classic crashes, 10 memory-related crashes, and about 8 disconnected from server bugs. The extreme degree of Extraction Point's problems can likely be attributed to recording software, but even without, I couldn't load into Interval 5 without reload saves and messing with the options. The only proper fix for most of these issues is to reload a save, go down to minimum settings, and load in like that. You then have to turn your settings back up, and in my case, save again, back out, go into the config files and change it to a proper resolution. I had to do this 10 times. It wasn't fun. Yet despite the fact I had to make the game look worse on a technical level, Extraction Point was still far more visually appealing than the first game thanks to its new environments. Instead of the original game's bland offering of various decrepit corridors and rooms, we've now got a church, giant open parking garages, a subway network, a much more interesting shipping yard, and a crashed plane. The game looks great in 2018, with the subway level in particular looking years ahead of the base game, all by being a little more creative with the environments. But that's enough on visuals. Let's get into the meat of the game. Extraction Point picks up where F.E.A.R left off. Alma, this spooky demon woman, crashes your helicopter as you fly away from the nuclear blast of the vault where she was being held. You, Jin, and Holiday survive. This expansion tells the story of you and your team trying to escape from this now demon and replica-infested city. In practical terms, that means 6 new intervals of content. Well, 5, since the 6th is just one arena. But those 5 intervals are far more rich in content than any one level from the base game, so you certainly get your money's worth with at least 4 hours of content compared to the base game's 7 to 8. And in my opinion, what we got was significantly better than anything from the first game. Yeah, Extraction Point not only does F.E.A.R better than F.E.A.R, it even brings plenty of content of its own. There are 2 new weapons and 1 new grenade, and I don't think I'd be alone in saying they're some of the best in the game. The new grenade isn't actually a grenade, it's a throwable turret. Great when there's too many angles to cover on your own, which is a very common theme in Extraction Point's new level design. It seems like an odd addition for an action FPS. Really, you want to be doing the fighting for yourself, but I get the feeling it was more meant as an excuse. It allowed Timegate to create levels in which you are hopelessly outnumbered and exposed by an overwhelming number of sightlines. The turrets give you a chance in those odds, and I'll admit, despite it being questionable for an FPS like F.E.A.R to have a very indirect weapon, it works wonders. It does allow you to compete against the armies of replica that you'd expect to be up against in an expansion pack, pack, and that's only added to by the rest of the Point Man's upgraded arsenal. The laser carbine's most notable feature is that amazing heat effect it creates on the environment. It fires a single stream of energy, so you've got to hold it on enemies to kill. There's no unique kill effect like the particle weapon, but you often end up cutting enemies in half, so it makes up for it. The laser carbine is an awesome addition, but I do think it's surprisingly uncommon for a new weapon. It's also totally overshadowed by the minigun. The best weapons in the games are the automatics, the ones that you can use to turn enemies into pencils with in reflex mode, and the minigun turns that up to 11. Using the minigun in this game can't not put a smile on your face. It's glorious. It's also the first power weapon in the game meant more for infantry than for mechs and heavy units, despite the fact that the majority of miniguns are required from dead heavies. The new heavies, that is. The ones with miniguns, a black coat of paint, huge health bars, and a giant shield. The minigun in their hand is inaccurate and easy to interrupt, which makes them vulnerable to being bursted down, but if they spool it up and catch you off guard, you're a goner. They're great new additions, and if anything are even more fun to fight than Monolith's original heavy units. Timegate also expands on the second type of bullet sponge enemies with their new giant mechs. They're like the normal mechs, but larger and more durable, though their fights play out completely differently due to smart objects. If you remember back to my first video on F.E.A.R, I said that AI work on a finite state machine that allows them to do 3 things in order to carry out their goals. They can go to, which involves moving, animate, which involves playing an animation, and smart object, which involves playing an animation. Except the smart object is specific to one particular location. A grenade throw would be animate because it can be done from anywhere, but toppling a shelf for cover is smart object because it's only possible next to a shelf. For Timegate's new mechs, we can see a plethora of smart objects in every arena you encounter them in. The parking garage of Interval 4 contains both new giant mech fights. They're capable of smashing through cars, creating great explosions, and even parts of the environment to get closer to you. It's an arena built perfectly for the enemy, and so despite how basic they are on paper, their fights end up being a blast. And neither of the new enemies are without purpose. You need something to spend your ammo on, because scarcity is a thing of the past. Extraction Point is an expansion pack, so it has to continue in terms of scale from the last game. There needs to be more enemies, they need to be tougher, and so do you. That's clear from the start, with grenades and power weapons being much more common to balance how many enemies there'll be. Dualies are still annoyingly uncommon, but thankfully you can drop both guns when swapping them out in this game, so you'll get to hang on to them for much longer this time around. But as much as you need to be brought up to stand a chance against the new enemies, you still need to be kept in check. The particle weapon was blatantly overpowered last game, and it made fights in which you didn't stop yourself from using it a slaughter. This game is much more careful with giving you the particle weapon, and that is a much needed mercy. In terms of firepower, Extraction Point is almost perfectly balanced, but as an expansion pack, you still want something a little more challenging. It's noticeable from the get-go that Extraction Point's hard difficulty is not F.E.A.R's hard difficulty. Enemies die quicker, and so the hell do you. You will be torn to shreds in this game if you're caught out in the open, which cements the first game's medkit problem. Avoiding damage was difficult when Monolith was at the wheel, but not impossible. Extraction Point makes reliably avoiding damage like trying to escape a black hole. You can try as much as you want, but it's not gonna happen. This creates an extreme over-reliance on reflex mode, punishing you for ever fighting without it because of how wasteful it is on your medkit supply. The effect of reflex mode could really wear off due to its never-ending use, and as an expansion pack, that only compounds on the base game, which had the same issue. This, in theory, would make Extraction Point incredibly repetitive, but Timegate offsets that. The biggest reason F.E.A.R AI is so unique is because it has a fear of death, allowing for much more human-like responses. Timegate added to this, I quote, "We had made some changes here and there with the AI so they would be more proactive in taking cover and trying to stay alive." End quote. So in theory, soldiers from Extraction Point would handle situations slightly differently from the base game, even if placed in the exact same arena. That should, if only slightly, differentiate Extraction Point from the base game. But even within the confines of Extraction Point itself, combat is kept fresh throughout, and that is thanks to creativity in level design. Damn near every fight in this entire game is memorable. I can still remember the design and strategies to almost every single one. That's the level of variation we're talking about. As we've discussed, the game's been expertly balanced to keep the experience fair while putting you up against hordes of enemies. In Interval 2, you enter a stack of cargo crates just after you're given 3 turrets. The enemy come from everywhere, always have the high ground, and could come around any one of the forest of corners at any time. You can get on top of the containers or weave within. Turret placement and focus are key to surviving. It's an awesome fight, certainly not one that you'd get from rooms and corridors. Verticality is a very common theme started in Interval 2. There are multiple layers to most arenas now, and that hugely advantages the enemy, until you take their place and abuse the high ground yourself. It's another balancing mechanic. Notice that in the cargo container arena of Interval 2, you're led onto the higher part initially, and that in the subway showdown at the end of Interval 3, you immediately eventually come out onto a platform overlooking the entire arena. That fight is close to being my favorite in the game. You've got an army's worth of ordnance to methodically take out the real army waiting for you within the maze of train cars, platforms, corridors, tracks, and columns. The open car doors and breakable glass of the trains allow for protection, cover, and easy sightlines for you and the enemy. The corridors on either side of the platform provide reliable cover and hiding spots. The columns are destructible, which creates even more chaos, and there's even a clear progression to the fight. You start out in the midst of the cars fighting infantry on all sides and end on the tracks with the heavy and the few remaining stragglers out in the open. It's an incredible fight, although I do wish you didn't get stuck on the column debris so often. It's also the best example of what creativity can do for the combat, and that's held up throughout the game. Also in Interval 3, you've got a downwards long-range battle with the rocket-wielding Heavy, the most dangerous enemy in the game. There's the ASP rifle for help at long range and columns for cover, but they'll only work once. In Interval 2, you've got a surprisingly fun sniping section and a huge open battle at a construction site with Holiday. Yeah, that's friendly AI for the first time. It works great thanks to the scale of the arena that's clearly meant for multiple friendly combatants. Interval 4 had that bombastic warlike battle against the replica in a parking garage, where you'll even be attacked by a helicopter. It follows it up with highly vertical battles in an office complex and some great fights in areas more reminiscent of the first game. Interval 5 takes place in a bloody hospital, and there you'll fight the toughest replica soldiers we've encountered so far. They take huge amounts of punishment, deal tons of damage, and have all the space they need to flank from every direction. Interval 6 is only one arena, but it's huge, and its difficulty is pretty much entirely up to what guns you brought through. Tens of powerful replica will pour from high cover into the midst of a kill zone and 2 covered wings. You can set up turrets to take some of the pressure off if necessary, but if you've kept the minigun or laser carbine, you can get a little more reckless. Creativity was this game's lifeblood. I don't think anyone wanted another 6 intervals full of rooms and corridors. An extraction point delivered a wildly varied experience. But oddly, the best arena in the game isn't particularly creative at all. No, creative isn't the word I'd use. I'd say perfect. It's in Interval 1. It's one of the first fights in the entire game. The funeral home fight. This arena wasn't built to be interesting. It was built to facilitate the AI as best as it possibly could. Every ingredient F.E.A.R AI needs to shine is here. There's a mix of engagement distances with a long corridor connecting a series of rooms, each cut off by closed doors. Enemies can flank from a multitude of directions, and they can be waiting in any one of the rooms. The majority of cover present in each room are smart objects, allowing the AI to move cover dynamically. There are windows allowing for the player and the AI to surprise each other. The point man only has basic weaponry such as the shotgun, dual pistol, submachine gun, and assault rifles, meaning considerable effort has to be put into killing each replica, something the power weapons frequently remove. Enemy placement is frequent and optimized to allow for surprises from the AI, meaning in each engagement the player has to think about multiple directions. The funeral home arena of Interval 1 is the first level in F.E.A.R that I let myself die in just for the fun of playing it again, and each time I did, it was different. I don't know how this works, but reloading a save won't keep the enemies in the exact same spot as before, and given the AI's capability, every different move you make could butterfly effect into the AI doing something totally different to respond. Extraction Point's combat is generally much better than the first game's offering, and that is a damn high bar. Creative arena design creates variation closer to Titanfall 2 than the consistent rooms and corridors of the base game. It keeps combat entertaining throughout, despite the new time to kill, which sets the reflex over reliance issues in stone. The new weapons are both incredible fun to use against the normal replica and 2 of the new enemies, the giant mech and the minigun heavy. The only big problem other than the time to kill is the checkpoints, which are far too infrequent. You can quick save, but you shouldn't have to. Overall, Extraction Point's combat is mint, some of the best you can get from the genre, and from what I've played and heard, the best in the series. I would never have expected an expansion developed by a different company to achieve that, but Timegate came through, and they didn't stop with combat. As we know, Extraction Point tells the story of the F.E.A.R team trying to escape the city after the nuclear meltdown at Alma's vault. The helicopter crashes, Jin's badly injured, but you go on ahead anyway. The game wants you on your own for the majority of the runtime, so you end up being separated from Holiday and Jin almost immediately. The only way to link back up with them is through this church, and guess who you meet inside? That's right, Paxton. Paxton is Baxton. How? Well, I don't know. We did kinda shoot him in the head. Paxton doesn't really know either, but he does know that he didn't like getting shot in the head, so he slowly reactivates the replica, creating this desperate scramble to kill them all before they wake up and slaughter you. Alma's also back. She's still a spooky bitch, no surprises there. Interval 2 has you trying to reconnect with Holiday. Jin's now on her own. You do eventually meet up with him, fight for a little bit, and then get separated once again. The game is self-aware by now, and that's certainly appreciated.
This just keeps getting better and better. We'll just meet up on the other side. Again.
Holiday is actually written very well. His wisecracks work great against the unsettling atmosphere and intentionally over horror.
Uh-oh. You go ahead. I've got your back. You see him too, don't you? Shit. No wonder Jin's having trouble. Man, this is not right. Yeah.
Paxton assaults the two of you with an army of replica, but you keep Holiday safe with a particle weapon from a watchtower. Soon after, Holiday gets brutally torn apart by demons. Well, that was unexpected. This death scene was shocking. Not only was it surprisingly graphic, but since you got all of Interval 2 to bond with Holiday in tense situations, it hit really hard. I didn't want Holiday to die, something I can't say for any of the characters in the last game. Interval 2 was probably the best mission from a narrative viewpoint we've gotten so far. Unfortunately, Interval 3 takes a bit of a left turn. Your motivation is now to find Jin and get the hell out of the city, so you head through a nearby subway. Basically nothing happens whatsoever until you get a cutscene, yes, a cutscene, of Alma killing the replica. Seems odd she'd do that, since she's allied with Paxton and Paxton controls the replica. Also seems odd that you'd get a cutscene to explain this. Clearly Timegate wanted to highlight this, even if it meant sacrificing the immersion you get from always having the point man's perspective. Later in the mission you're heading down a train tunnel filled with replica. You can't kill them with your CQC oriented weapons since they're too far away. You're in a tough spot, but Alma shows up and murders all the replica at the other side. She then says, "You're safe now."
You're safe now.
So she wants us safe? Why? Why now? Why turn on Paxton? Interesting questions, but a much more important issue is why does this never come up again at any point for the rest of the game? Yeah, after this point we just forget that ever happened. Paxton does show up again, shocked at the fact that you still don't know. And yeah, that's also never brought up again. Nothing else happens until the end of Interval 4 when you find Jin. She is very, very dead. It's a horrific scene, but of course it has none of the impact that Holiday's death had. So now, all you've got to keep you going is trying to escape yourself. Interval 5 doesn't have much going on, and we end at Interval 6. Paxton sends an army after you. You beat them and walk over to the Black Hawk with the F.E.A.R captain waiting to pick you up. To absolutely no one's surprise, the helicopter promptly explodes. You recover and overlook the burning city. Everything Paxton said came true. Fires, cities turn to dust. And that's it. A very dark note, but that's to be expected. Interval 2 was great, the rest was awful. None of the mystery from the base game is present here, more than likely why the discoverable laptops are missing, and the answering machine audio logs are hilariously, ironically, phoned in.
John, what's happening? I can't reach anybody.
Alma's motive switched on a dime. Does she want to keep you safe? I have my doubts, what with the murderous demons knocking about. Why does Paxton not support her? Why does Alma not support Paxton? Why is Paxton even back? What does he mean, you still don't know? Why was that captain guy dumb enough to fly yet another Black Hawk deep into enemy territory? Even though the average lifespan of a Black Hawk in F.E.A.R can be measured in fucking chronons. There's no defense, no string of plot that could tie all of these conflicting motivations and events together. either. It's just a mess. The only worthwhile narrative note the game has is Holiday being fleshed out, literally as well as figuratively. Once again, the fleeting story is nothing more than context for the horror, a tragic note to end F.E.A.R and the Point Man story on. So let's hope the horror was worth it. Last game, the horror had its strokes of brilliance, the lighting system, the dynamic thrill of fighting the replica assassins, but most of the game's fear factor came from cheap jump scares, music, and an obnoxious screech noise. Much of the time, it failed to be scary at all. Well, Timegate were clearly aware of that because this game is scary as shit. Now, there's still cheap jump scares. What would F.E.A.R be without Alma showing up while you're stuck on a ladder? And of course, we can't forget Paxton ominously standing outside a window, which challenges even the skeleton hug as the most unintentionally funny thing a horror game has ever done. Alma and Paxton are still clearly the horror's weak points, despite how well presented a few of the new Alma Mindjack sections are. It's Timegate's new additions that make Extraction Point genuinely scary at times. It's these bastards. They're called Shades, and like the nightmares from the first game, are Alma's apparitions, products of her tortured childhood. Perhaps that's why she doesn't have control of them. Their twisted, unnatural stances along with that unsettling head spaz effect give them this almost cursed feeling. The way they blink with the lights in and out of reality, the fact that they randomly appear where you least expect them. Just watch this. This is damn scary, and for the right reasons. But there are actually two types of Shades. You've got the creepy ones, as we just saw, and the ones you fight. The Shades you fight follow the exact same formula as the replica assassins, who also show up on multiple occasions. They're teased and hyped up a bunch before they actually strike a while later, so there's a huge jump effect because you never expected them to come out at you. This time it doesn't work as well because it's a one-for-one rerun of the assassins, and of course it's extremely likely that you'd have played F.E.A.R before Extraction Point. The Shades also seem to behave totally differently in this form. During battle and all of their teases, they're animalistic in nature, not otherworldly. It takes away a lot of what made them so terrifying. They just claw at you like cats and run away as soon as they get a hit in. They're also invisible in this form with just their red eye to give them away. It's nothing we haven't seen before, and a real disappointment. Imagine if the Shades would blink to move and retain their contortionist positions all over the ceilings and walls. They would attack in the same way by dealing damage up close, but instead of going invisible, they'd do what they've always done. Turn off the lights briefly. The blinks would allow you just enough time to take shots. That, in my opinion, would be truly terrifying, but I can see how it would also be much more costly. A shame. But thankfully, the unsettling offness of the world after Alma's escape also shows itself with the nightmares from the first game. Sometimes you'll see tens of demons crawling on the ceilings and walls, and then they'll just disappear. Like, they're there, but you just can't see them anymore. It's great stuff, and in one arena, Timegate gives the nightmares the treatment that the Shades would have much better suited, but it's damn scary nonetheless. I'm left impressed by just how much Timegate were able to enhance F.E.A.R's horror. Alma and Paxton are still dull, but both demons were able, with scripted horror, to create genuine fear. Though the replica assassins and lighting systems remain the best implementation of the horror by far because they link the combat and the horror dynamically. Extraction Point is different from F.E.A.R in that the proportion of combat to horror segments does not fall off as the game continues. If anything, the amount of horror never stops increasing, peaking at interval 5, which is the first proper mission to have significantly more horror than combat. Extraction Point is 5 hours long, and you get 2.5 hours of some of the best FPS combat ever, and 2.5 hours of horror, some of which is genuinely scary, most of which remains mundane, but only a tiny fraction of which is at home in an action FPS. I spent half my time having fun, and half my time wishing I was in a combat section. Now that's very subjective. Some enjoy the horror despite its form, but I don't think any would argue that scripted horror is right for F.E.A.R no matter how scary they find it. F.E.A.R Extraction Point had easily the best combat of the base game and its sister expansion Perseus Mandate, with 2 glorious new weapons, excellent level design, and great new enemies. If you enjoy FPS, you cannot miss this. If you love horror games, Extraction Point is the first time the series gets truly scary, and is absolutely worth your time. But if you want a horror experience that matches the game it's been spliced into, Extraction Point repeats its predecessor's mistakes. And if you want a good story in your FPS games, Extraction Point will once again disappoint. Despite its shortcomings, I'd say having some of the the best combat in the business is quite an achievement, especially considering Extraction Point is an outsourced expansion pack. It's hard not to be impressed with Timegate. Unfortunately for them though, Extraction Point isn't actually real. You see, both Extraction Point and Perseus Mandate with its unconnected, irrelevant story were retconned by F.E.A.R 2 for some reason. The Vivendi timeline includes F.E.A.R in its expansions, while the Monolith timeline goes numerically, from F.E.A.R to F.E.A.R 2 and finishing with F.E.A.R 3. I don't know whether to be thankful for this or upset. Extraction Point didn't have a strong story to finish on, but then again, neither did F.E.A.R 3. Personally, I see no reason to retcon Extraction Point, since it doesn't conflict with F.E.A.R 2 or 3. It can still tell the story of what happened to the Point Man, Jin, Holiday, and Captain Dude after F.E.A.R, it just won't tell it well. That concludes my look at the first of F.E.A.R's expansions. The next video in the series will be on Perseus Mandate. That's going to be a lot of fun, but I get the feeling it won't be as much fun as F.E.A.R 2 and 3. If you'd like to see any of those videos, do consider subscribing. I'm just above the 10,000 mark at the moment, so I might start working on something very special for that alongside Perseus Mandate. In the meantime, I'd like to suggest subscribing to Squid the Cid, Aporia, and Red Value Gaming again. All three of these creators are going to be affected by YouTube's monetization threshold changes, and all three have content that is absolutely worth your time, such as Squid's in-depth game reviews, much like my own, Aporia's video essays, and Red Value's consumer-focused reviews. If I could get even one of these guys over 1,000 subs by February 20th when the changes take place, I'd consider it an achievement. Thanks for watching everyone, I'll see you next time.